This must be one of the rarest sights in the world of classic cars. A procession of 7 immaculately preserved Humber Pullmans, Imperials and Snipes as they wind their way through the historic East Yorkshire town of Beverley. The Army Museum of Transport at Beverley houses another Humber, if not the most famous of Humbers in its day. Monty's staff car. To have survived the rigours of war and both the heat and the sand of the western desert is testament enough to the quality of these once popular vehicles. But more of Monty and his beloved staff car later. What about the man Humber himself? What would he have thought had he lived to see a car of his famous name bearing Britain's best loved wartime commander to one victory after another? Thomas Humber, a man who started off as a blacksmith, went on to build early pedal cycles in the later part of the last century before laying the foundations of one of the most respected quality car manufacturers in the whole history of the industry. The River Hull here runs through the city of Hull and out into the great estuary of the Humber, a spurious connection, one would think, with the founder of one of the most renowned names in British motoring, but a connection there most certainly is. Just a stone's throw away from this spot at Drypool Bridge, over there, near to the back of the White Hart, lies the ancient Hull Street of Salthouse Lane. It was at the National School, here in Salthouse Lane, though now long since vanished, that Thomas Humber spent 5 of his young years and received his education, after his parents had moved to Hull in the late 1840s. He may well have lived for a while within a stone's throw of the great river whose name he coincidentally shared, and almost certainly played around on the Humber foreshore with other boys of the time. But contrary to what most people would think, he wasn't born here. Thomas Humber was a Sheffield lad, son of a tailor and born in 1841 in the Brightside district of that city. But he came to Hull to live aged 8 years and stayed until he was 13 in 1854 when his family moved to Nottingham. It was in Nottingham that he started work as an apprentice blacksmith, and of course Nottingham figures large in the Humber story thereafter. A further period of residence in Hull would occur a little later, as he moved from job to job, acquiring more and more experience and ideas as he went. But it was to Nottingham that he returned to set up his own business as a blacksmith. Our story here is of the post-vintage era of the Humber marque, but we'll start with a very brief look at those early years, and return to Hull later to see the world's largest collection of post-vintage Humbers anywhere, owned by one family. But it was not as a manufacturer of cars that Thomas Humber first made his name, but of bicycles in the late 1860s. His previous employer, a William Campion, returned from an engineering exhibition in Paris with an early French bicycle, though nothing like this one shown, and brought it to Thomas to make a copy. It is perhaps ironic that despite copyright regulations of the time, Thomas made half a dozen copies of those early French machines, both for his ex-employer and himself, yet his own designs were later widely pirated. This Humber Spider bicycle of 1873 is the first complete cycle that Thomas made for himself. He must have realised that he could make his own living just crafting bicycles, for in that year he started in business for himself, manufacturing his own designs over the next few years in workshops at a number of addresses in Nottingham, first in Northumberland Street, then Stretton Street, later in Great Alfred Street and Queen's Road, and with various partners. By 1878, Humber, Marriott and Cooper moved their entire operation to a new factory at Beeston, just outside Nottingham. Showing an early streak of inventiveness, He improved upon his designs as he went along, making them more graceful and appealing to look at. Progress continued with new developments over the next decade or so. Tricycles, Thomas himself here on this one. Several safety features, and the penny farthing with its 62-inch front wheel diameter, or made to measure according to the rider's size, to name but a few. Growing success meant that extra premises had to be purchased, first in Coventry in Lower Ford Street, and Wolverhampton at 2 addresses in Brickkiln Street and Pulteney Street, though the Wolverhampton works had all closed by 1901. Others were established abroad, in Paris, the USA, Russia, Portugal, Denmark and Sweden. But 1892 saw Thomas Humber, for various reasons, leave the company he had nurtured and prospered. Other setbacks and disasters came at intervals, like the fire in 1896 that burned down the Lower Ford Street works. Nevertheless, by 1900 and the turn of the century, his name was to grace one of the biggest cycle manufacturers in Britain. Humber Limited, some years later in 1908, went on to leave the Nottingham Beeston works and move entirely to the then new Stoke plant near Coventry. At their peak, Humber were producing many thousands of bikes a year. The Nottingham factory was ultimately sold, and the site was later to be acquired by another rising star in the bicycle world, Raleigh. There is a claim, quite justified, that Humbers had the longest pedigree within the motor car manufacturing industry, for by 1895 they added motorised vehicles to their cycle production. During this decade, several innovative designs using various combinations of 2- and 3-seater vehicles, 2 and 3 wheels, all basically early motorised bicycles and tricycles, emerged from the Beeston and Coventry factories. The first vehicle we would recognise as a 4-wheel combustion engine motor car, however, was this Coventry-built 2-seater Humber Phaeton of 1900. A mysterious design of 3 years earlier did have 4 wheels, but it may have been powered electrically. Who knows? The Phaeton visually is what we would call a horseless carriage, but it did have a horizontal front-mounted air-cooled engine driving a belt to the rear axle. Perhaps the most important car of Humber's early history is the Humberette of 1903. With its twin seat a little lower down, an enclosed engine giving it a squarish bonnet, conventional mudguards, wheels with fewer spokes that looked less like pram wheels, it was the first Humber to be built at both the Coventry and Beeston plants. With engines mounted vertically, twin-speed gearbox and shaft final drive, it was very reliable and must have proved popular with the early motoring public, for 500 were built within 6 months of its launch. Thomas Humber did not live to see his cars become, as they did, less than 2 decades later, the last word in comfort and style. He died aged 69 in 1910, 4 years before the First World War. Just before his death, however, he did live to see his name grace the new medium of powered flight. In 1909, never being a company to miss a chance, and with an aviation-mad director who had an eye on a developing aero market, Humbers had opened an aircraft department. It closed 2 years later, just after Thomas's death, and long before the war started, though it is worth noting that there is a claim that the world's very first airmail service in India was operated using Humbers. Throughout the First War, Humbers continued to make bicycles and motorbikes, though mainly for the military. But car production stopped, suspended in 1916, perhaps from both a shortage of customers who could afford them and of materials. Certainly, at the start of the war 2 years earlier, Humber ranked only 3rd in the land in terms of quantity of production, and that only behind Ford and Wolseley. The company's wartime aeroplane production included many of the famous Avro 504K, and at W.O. Bentley's instigation, the Bentley 230 horsepower BR2 9-cylinder radial engines, forging a link that led to some Humber senior staff joining the Bentley Motor Company after the war. So they were the very early days. The post-war period of the 20s and 30s would be a time of great change for Humber Limited. But the company, now without its founder, was sadly not without its continuing problems within the boardroom and higher management. Problems that had plagued it even from Thomas Humber's own time, Even so, great new technological strides were made. Motorbikes continued to be produced alongside cars until 1931, and cycles until 1933. Repeated success in the growing sport of motor racing brought new prestige. From about 1902 up until the First War, the company actively took part in many competitions and speed trials, including every one of the early tourist trophy races on the Isle of Man, for instance. Here, sitting astride his 2 3/4 horsepower V-twin Humber, is T.G. Knowles, when he took 11th place in 1913. But unlike some other makers who raced actively, Humber did not use race-derived innovations in their production models. Humbers were, by the 1920s, a symbol of unpretentious luxury. The company by now had long been able to proudly display the coveted royal appointment to His Majesty King George V, both for the manufacture and supply of bicycles and luxury motor cars. Boardroom battles in the late 1920s saw the merger of Humber Limited with another revered British Coventry marque, Hillman, based at nearby Ryton-on-Dunsmore, and the writing was on the wall for yet more takeovers, as the motor industry fought for survival in the darkest days of the slump. The famous Rootes brothers had already acquired the prestigious London firm of coach builders Thrupp and Maberley back in 1925. Having also previously acquired Singer and Sunbeam, Rootes in 1932 proceeded to take over Humber Hillman Limited and save them from almost certain extinction. With these changes came the inevitable shift of Humber manufacture to the Ryton plant. This is significant to our story, as all of the post-vintage Humbers we shall see later were built here. Under the dynamic control of the Rootes brothers, the 1930s saw changes that made the resurrected Humber part of the group continuing to build the luxury motors that took them to new pinnacles of esteem in the years leading up to the austere period of wartime. This was the time when the trio of model names Pullman, Snipe and Imperial were inaugurated, and the famous Snipe logo came into being. But once the war had started, it would be several years before the company would once again be building popular cars for the luxury market. The Second World War brought the company to a height of fame and achievement that no amount of peacetime advertising campaigns could ever have done. Humbers were now a chosen manufacturer for the smaller military vehicle, such as personnel staff cars. Although the company also made small armoured cars and personnel carriers, it was General Bernard Law Montgomery's choice of a Humber for his personal transport in the North African campaigns and beyond that added the final seal of approval. He was still using this same vehicle 3 years later, now a Field Marshal and Britain's most renowned of top brass, when he accepted the Nazi surrender on Lüneburg Heath in 1945. It had travelled with him from North Africa, through the Italian campaign, back into Europe at Normandy, and right across Northern Europe. Humbers, like Monty himself, came out of the war with flying colours, and bathed in glory. His staff car takes pride of place in the Museum of Army Transport here at Beverley, and is still used on occasion for rather more peaceful and less hazardous duties. The post-Second War era was perhaps the most successful the marque would ever see, albeit as part of Rootes Motors. There was continued approval of the company by the royal family, by the late King's son, George VI, as the chosen limousine for foreign tours and all manner of state occasions. As in other things, he had impeccable taste. For several years, the only road vehicles that could upstage a Humber were the Irish state coach and royal carriages themselves. Humbers had been bought since the 20s by royalty, the nobility, and as chauffeur-driven limousines by many large organisations and companies. They had style, class, and above all else, prestige. Thomas would have been more than proud. If he could have lived into his 80s or 90s, we may speculate on the possibility that he may have been knighted. These vehicles, quality built in the heart of the English Midlands, by craftsmen using only the best materials, were well into the 50s and the late King's daughter's reign, symbolic of all that was perceived as best about Britain and British workmanship. It seemed nothing less than natural that they should become the standard British ministerial and embassy car worldwide. Before we end our potted history, let's first go back to 1912 and take a more detailed look at some immaculately restored Humbers. This first one in North Lincolnshire. Its proud owner tells its story.
Hello, my name's John Barker, and the car you have been looking at is a 1912 Humber, imported into this country about 7 or 8 years ago from Argentina. It went out to South America when it was new, stayed there all of its life, lived a very, very hard life, came back, and I have restored it over the past 3 years. It's now, although not exactly original, one of the most original Humber cars I think that will be still in the country. It's an 11.3 horsepower model, which means that it's not the smallest one and by no means the largest, but carries a very heavy body on a medium-sized engine. There are some unusual features about this particular model in that they only made this 3-speed model for probably a year and a half. They then got a new designer who decided that that car was not satisfactory for the British market or for the foreign markets, and then uprated it to a 4-speed model, which made a big difference. The other unusual features are that it is the first, or one of the first, some claim the very first, full monoblock engine, in that the entire top half of the engine is cast in one piece. Other unusual bits, most cars at that period had to have separate spare wheels, spare tyres. This one has got knock-off wheels and just 4 bolts, 3 minutes or even less with an experienced person, and you could change a wheel. Bearing in mind, of course, in those days that wheels and tyres had to be changed regularly. Punctures were the bane of the life of motorists in those days. What else have we got that's interesting? The usual features, of course. It did have carbide lamps, front headlamps with a carbide generator. It should have a tube between the generator and the lamps, but nowadays rubber seems to be much stiffer and harder and bounces around and makes an awful rattly noise, so we seldom, unless we want the things to operate, use the rubber tubing. The one anomaly that Humbers did in the early cars was to put the track rod end and the steering arm in front of the main beam front axle, which left it very vulnerable. That's probably all that is different from Humber cars in that period to cars generally like Sunbeam, Talbots, and all the general run-of-mill vehicles that were made at that period.
I'm Mike White. My Humber is a 920 Tourer. There were less than 3,500 of these made, of which less than half were Tourers. Mine's a 1926 example, and they were built between 1925 and 1929. I don't know how many are left, but there are about 60 registered with the Humber Owners Club, which is called the Humber Register, including 2 in Australia and 1 in Norway. She doesn't have any front wheel brakes, rear wheel brakes and a transmission brake only, operated by rods. And she's not very powerful, just over 1 litre, but she's a very sweet, easy driving car, and I fell in love with her.
This is an example of the Humber 12 model. This was one of the small Humbers that was produced in the immediate years before the war. The first 12s were made in about 1933, and they were made until the outbreak of war. And the standard of this particular car is typical of the late end of the production run. It was a very solidly built car, regarded as a gentleman's car, just a little more upmarket than some of the popular cars of the period. And this was shown really by the standards of trim, and it was very comfortably upholstered in leather, but it is a metal framed body, which is of course very early metal construction for this type of car. It has a 4-cylinder side valve engine of 1669 cc's, a 4-speed gearbox with a very simple form of synchromesh on all gears, and conventional transmission. It has cable brakes, which are somewhat difficult to balance but are very, very powerful when they are working properly. This particular car was bought in 1936 by a Mr. Parsons in London. He drove the car until the outbreak of war, and by that time it had covered about 14,000 miles. It was then laid up during the war, and in fact it still has a sticker under the bonnet of the car advising you how to immobilize the vehicle in the event of invasion. After the war, Mr. Parsons was in poor health and wasn't able to drive the car, but he wouldn't sell it. And so we had the situation that on his death in 1962, the car had still only done 14,000 miles. It then passed to a Mr. Dew, and Mr. Dew is still alive, and he tells us quite a lot about the car. And he was a neighbour of the original owner, and so he knows the car from new. He kept it as his wife's car until 1972. Then it moved to an owner in Lancashire, in Burnley, and I bought it from there.
Hello, my name is Bob Parks. The machine you're about to look at is a Humber No. 5 tandem tricycle. Reference to this bicycle goes back to 1885 and probably before, but we don't have reference before that period. The bicycle is built with 40-inch front drive wheels and a 24-inch rear wheel and an 8-inch safety wheel at the front. One point of interest about this bicycle is the brake. It's a band brake similar to what is fit to the motor vehicles of the period and very much advanced for its time. Also, the handle grips on the machine are made of wood, not like the rubber handle grips or the plastic ones as you get today. Prior to this type of machine being built, bicycles were only for one rider. This type of machine enabled man and wife to go out together. This bugler was at some period presented to Thomas Humber, but this would be presented to him prior to the tandem being made. It was in the days of riding the high-wheeled ordinary that he would be presented with this as a gift, probably from the club for some event that he had taken part in, or for duties that he'd done for the club in the past year. The bicycle is actually the property of the Castle Museum at York. This bicycle had been in storage at the museum since 1915, and seeing it in the state that it was in, I thought the machine should come out and be restored. I've now had it, believe it or not, for 17 years, and the restoration still isn't complete.
These are some of the cars that appeared in the 1993 National Rally of the Post Vintage Humber Car Club. I'm going to try and put a few names to some of the cars that was here. And I didn't attend this rally myself at the time, but GSK, that will be coming back to the car list later on. SK number plates was issued by Swansea they were never issued actually to any cars, they just kept them in reserve SKs and allotted them to cars of, like that one was, which was bought from Jersey, and they gave them any car you see with an SK number plate is a re-registered car. This car here, Harry Cornelensen, he drove this car from the Netherlands, and he generally always here on the rallies. always wins the longest distance driver award. These are Super Snipes. I believe that one's Stan Beaumont, I believe. I think this vehicle was originally owned by Sir Robert McAlpine. That could be Tom Butlin's, I aren't real sure. The Post-Vintage Humber Car Club was formed in 1974 by a few Humber enthusiasts in the London area. Since then we've grown to 1,000 strong. Peter Dalton was appointed the first chairman of the Humber Post-Vintage Humber Car Club, and we cater for cars from 1937 through to 1976, which was the demise of the Humber cars. The next car that's going to come up is one of the very early Humber Super Snipes. Different grille at the front, didn't have the double headlamps. Double headlamps came later on. That car had a smaller engine, that particular model. This is a winner in its class. It has the bigger picnic table in the back, and not very many of these cars survive actually. They're quite rare, and this is a particularly nice one. Belonged to Anthony Hodkin, I believe, 1959. This estate car, which appears again a bit later on. Very few of these survive. We'll see a better shot of that later on. Belonged to Alan Badham. These are the early Humber Sceptres. These were the last of the Humbers, of course, the 1970s, taken over by Chrysler and went. Different models, that's the estate car. This particular one has got a wool moquette interior, which is particularly rare actually. They usually had vinyl interiors, and to see one with a moquette interior must have been a special order. This is a particularly nice car, the Vogue 12 Coupe, Martin Williams, and it's just had a recent restoration. In fact, this is the first time this car has been on the road since the restoration was complete, and very nice it looks. Note the door handle there where the windows can be lifted up quite rapidly instead of a window winder. Lots of cars in them days had that type of fitted door handle. And that's the 1935 Humber Vogue. I don't know whose that car is. That's Mike Shepherd's Mark 1 Sceptre. Humber cars in the past have never achieved the credit they deserved, but are now coming into their own. They are recognised as a very rare breed of motor car. I think this one's Sue Bales, 1968. Not quite sure until I see the registration number again. Yes, that's Sue Bale's car. It's one of the best Imperials there is about. It's always in the top 6 of all the Imperials. In fact, there really only is, out of all the Humber Imperials, there only is about 6. And the one next to it is another winning car. There's only about 6 really good Imperials, and you're looking at 2 of them there. I always seem to share the awards at the national rallies. They're always there in the top 3. They're very expensive to keep in this condition. It's a credit to the owners who've got these cars. Back onto the Scepters again. Scepter estate car. That belongs to Philip Coves. I hope I pronounced his name right. And that's the we're back on the estate car there, I think. 742 Flow, if that's the car. Belongs to Adam. That's the interior shot. I'm quite sure that's his car. I'm not quite sure if it went for sale, this car as well, at the time, and was sold at this particular rally. That's well, we know, everybody knows whose that car is. That's Tom Cantwell's car. Elijah. Fine car. Not many of those about. He's had it a long time. And there we are back with another early series estate car. The front's slightly different. Oh, this is the one that was for sale. That's the one. Now see, if we look at the front view, it's got a sold ticker on it. So that car was sold on that particular rally day. Our next car belongs to Cyril Crouch. 1966 one. Looked after that one very carefully. The Pullman that was on earlier on will be coming up next. Warren Ball brought the car from Jersey. It was used in a film. Can't recall the film it was used for. It was used in a film. There it is. I do know that the film people changed the interior, took the West of England cloth out, which seems a shame to me, and put this vinyl interior in, which I think West of England cloth was far better. Anybody restoring a car and putting material in, it's always best to put the best in. The labour is what costs the most money. It's always best to buy the best materials. The labour is the most expensive item. 1953 overhead valve car, that one. Brought it from Jersey. As I earlier said, it's got an SK number plate, which was allotted to all cars that had to be re-registered. It lost its Jersey number plate and given an SK number plate. That's Stuart Trower. I think that's his car. This is the original upholstery in this car. It's in leather. It was a special order when all these cars was done in vinyl, and that was a special order. Someone must have stipulated they wanted it in leather. The Mark Hawk, that blue one there, that belongs to Richard Grant. It's a Mark 6A Hawk. Now this is the Army staff car. Big tyres on them. There's plenty of them in the museums, but you don't see many on the roads. And here we are. There's the cars. The day over, all heading for home. That was Clive Starr, by the way, and it was a 1939 car, that staff car. Belonged to Clive Starr. There's not many of them left.
Humbers have never been ones to shrink from challenges of strength and endurance. It is November 1952. Yorkshireman George Hinchcliffe, along with co-drivers R. Walshaw and C.A. Longman, will drive a Super Snipe from London to Cape Town and attempt to break his own world record of 21 days, 19 hours and 45 minutes. Bearded George, looking every inch a sea dog, signs the official documents before leaving the Mall and passes through Admiralty Arch at the start of this 10,500 mile drive against the clock. He has some idea of what they were in for. He's made this journey twice before. Weaving through the friendly traffic of London, we can be curious as to the thoughts of George and his crew, all hardy Yorkshiremen, as they head for the Kentish Downs and Lymm Aerodrome. A short flight by air freighter to Le Touquet, and we start the long haul south to Gib. The long straight roads of France in an icy winter, but still a joy in a fast car as they head for the sun. Spain and Gibraltar behind, and so to Africa, to sweep past more ancient modes of travel, only to succumb to the first of many hazards of this continent's harsh terrain. Crossing the Sahara is no mean feat in any language, but they make it look easy and on schedule. A 2,300 mile road in 75 hours and 25 minutes, one of the fastest Sahara crossings ever. From now on, major hazards will be the countless river crossings. But Humbers were designed with plenty of clearance to allow for just such tricky situations as these. Horsepower may be the key to the motorcar's world, but Africa now, as through her history, still depends more on manpower. Through the bush and tall elephant grass, anything can suddenly come into view, allowing for no lapses in concentration. They've been on the road for 8 days now. As they make the south bank of the Congo, after 7,000 miles, they're barely holding to schedule. The sheer effort of concentration is an ordeal in itself. But eventually the last great landmarks loom large ahead. Shelmeck's house in Cape Town. The timekeepers are waiting. The official verdict, 13 days, 9 hours and 6 minutes, a new world record, and not just for speed, but for endurance, reliability and sheer stamina, for both car and its crew. Humbers prove their worth yet again.
Hello, I'm Reg Marshall. I'm now going to talk to you about the Marshall
family-owned collection of various Humbers, all painted in black pearl over shell grey, all working cars and considered to be the largest collection of this type of the car world known. We're going to commence with ORB 910, which is a Imperial Launderette. We're still researching into this car. We don't know the history of this car as we've only just purchased it, and the previous owner actually painted in our colours to do what we do. So we've done nothing at all to this car except drive it from where we bought it from, bring it to Hull and put it straight to work. It's done 17,000 miles from new, been carefully stored all its life, and we consider ourselves very fortunate to have obtained this car. Very popular as a bridal car, with the top being able to be folded down, and very impressive. As you can see, as people go by, they turn their heads and they look at it and think, what a marvellous car these are. There she goes out of sight. Our next car is OUV 999. We bought this car in 1964, and this is one of the very first cars that we ever bought and kept. My son Alan, who is now 40-year-old, was 5-year-old or so when he used to sit on my knee and drive his car, and there he is driving this car now. He really loves this car. Oh, it's got the blue ribbon engine in it, smooth drive, totally reliable, 9-seater car, weighs over 2 tons, getting on to 3 ton when you've got a full load of passengers in, and effortless motoring and silent. Another lovely car. And there goes OUV 999, very popular with the police, that car, as wedding cars. Our next car is MXO 143. This was in quite a dilapidated condition when we bought this car, but we considered it was worth saving, and it has been the subject of a £20,000 3-year restoration. This car has got an electric division. Very few cars had electric division. They mostly all had sliding divisions, but this has got the electric division. Soundproof in the back. Very, very similar. All these cars are similar, all in the same coachwork, all quietly running cars. This is done in 2-tone leather interior to match the car, darker grey in the back, lighter grey in the driver's compartment. Very popular because of the extremely nice interior that this car has. And there goes MXO. Our next car is KWW 615. This is a 1951 Humber Super Snipe Mark III Sports Saloon. 6-seater, very rare car. Very few of these cars are said to exist in the world today. This example has 11,000 miles from new, sunshine roof, factory fitted. Very nice motor car. This car is follows the Humber Pullman at a wedding. Usually the best man and the groom, and then back for the bridesmaids. And usually 2 of these cars would possibly follow a Pullman at a wedding. Very fast motor cars in the day, side valve engine. Very little change in the engines in many, many years. The same engine virtually sourced through the war and continued until 1954, before the blue ribbon engine came out. All the Humber cars had side valve engines. totally unmarked, all our cars. Well, our next car is one of the virtually the last of the big Humbers. This is the Humber Imperial Saloon. First British car to have the double headlamps. Rolls-Royce followed suit not long after this. Chrysler had took us over. They'd bought Humbers out and brought a lot of their ideas across with them. Disc brakes, double headlights, lots of other refinements, loads of chrome, walnut dashboard, individual seats, power steering, automatic, fully automatic cars. Borg Warner gearboxes, as everything had Borg Warner gearboxes then. And quite modern, although it's 35 years old or so, it's over 30 years old, it's still a very nice motor car and used at weddings there again. Our next car, HRP 27. HRP 27. Humbers run perfectly. There again, another low mileage Humber Pullman. 20,000 miles this one's done. We bought this in 1987. Very little restoration needed to be done to this car, apart from paint it in our colours. Nothing else has been done to it. Very well looked after car. Side valve engine again, it's got a side valve engine in. And Humbers do run perfectly. Very nice. And that's that car. Our next car now, coming up, JWS 547. We bought this car in 1972. It had been used in the film Oh Boy, the Buddy Holly film Oh Boy. 35,000 miles, one of the higher mileage cars of what we got. Very immaculate, very original. There again, apart from the colour and the white wall tyres, completely original. We do have a fitter, Al Stebbins, who's worked on these cars for as long as we've had the cars, and he has a full-time job and a proper fitted out workshop to continue with the restoration. We also on the premises have something like 20 or 30 cars which we use for spare parts, which are considered not restoration projects. JWS 547. Now this is the last of the chassis-built Humber cars. This one, RWY 193. We bought it in 1959. This is one of the cars that featured, or a carbon copy of the car that featured in the long run. It's in the book which Sterling Moss drove. He has actually driven this car as well. He recently, some 1990, he drove this car. And we have photographed somewhere along the line with him driving this car. Very, very fast car for its time. One of the rarest of all the Humber cars is that one. Not many Mark IVs left. Blue ribboned engine. Chrome bore engine, built to last forever. This is NYF 596E. We bought this car in 1969. coachwork bathroom in Mabley again, is as with all of our cars. Won many awards in its class. Another very low mileage car. We've had it most of its life. Done 2,000 miles when we bought it, and been very well looked after and cherished. Very much loved car by us. Used as my personal car in these summer Sundays on the Sunday drives. You've got to remember all our cars now are working cars, and as such are very well known literally throughout the world as being such perfect motor cars. It's hard to keep these cars on the road, and you have to do weddings to really generate the money to keep the restoration projects going. Without weddings, a lot of these cars would have been gone forever, not been saved. NKH260. Well, this car was located in Jersey. It's had valve engine again, much like the other Mark IIIs. We were told about this car. We went on holiday to Jersey, found it in a barn. It literally is in a barn. We took photographs of it because it was so dark in the barn we could only see the car when we had the photographs developed. And we brought it from Jersey. It cost £2,000 in tax and transport to bring it all the way from Jersey to Hull. 17,000 miles that particular car's done. Sunshine roof there again. A lot of pre-war post-war cars and as well as pre-war cars had sunshine roofs as standard fittings. Of course, it didn't carry its Jersey number plate. We've got a local number on that car to make it a little bit better. Rug 224. This is probably one of the rarest of all Humber cars. If there's more than 2 or 3 of these cars existing, I'd be very much surprised if there was more. We always thought that this was the only one, and we've yet to see another one. This car's got a fully automatic transmission, quite rare, Borg-Warner gearbox, individual seats at the front. All these cars are all leather interiors, and another low mileage car. Extremely rare. A Leeds rate. We found this car in Leeds. It auctioned off in Leeds, and we went to the auction, and with the car came literally a van load of spare parts in T-chests. And we were several weeks enjoying ourselves, opening up all these parcels and finding just what came with the car. EGS 21. Now this is quite a special car. This was used by the Queen Mother at the Castle May in Scotland, and used by her personal transport for going to church, taking her to the airport, local functions. It never ever left Scotland. Quite a low mileage car. $22,000 miles. The condition of these cars underneath is just the same as it is above the. Our cars are never put into storage when they're damp. They're always taken on the roads on a dry day as soon as possible to dry everything out, to let the wind dry everything out before they're stored. Cleaned and polished and stored in the 10,000 square feet garage with workshops at the end. EGS 21. Lovely number plate. Now this is a transformed Joy pedal car. Very popular with weddings though. A bridesmaid and page boys of the right age love to pedal that about. Here we are at Burton Constable Hall here. where we took our cars for this calendar photograph. Here the cars are all coming back to base. Coming up next is the Humber Sceptre, the last car to bear the Humber name, 1976. That was an era Humber finished. And it's only through the Humber owners that's throughout the country and the world that's kept some of these cars alive, that they're able to be there for future generations to see what marvellous cars these wakes actually were. And there is the Humber Sceptre. Still nicely finished interiors, and literally a small Humber, a more economical car to run. Humber Sceptre. We're shortly going to hold a rally on the 30th of June this year, 1996, commencing from the Humber Bridge car park to celebrate the centenary. There's the Humber Bridge, to celebrate 100 years of Humber's first production, and this is where the rally will finish at the Beverley Transport Museum. Marvellous place.